Next came the flight portion, and until very close to the Checkride, I didn't know that the whole flight portion would be pre-planned and explained. Because during my training, the double I would often do an approach that we planned and then say, oh, well, let's go to that airport, let's go brief it real quick, which would be a little bit of a rush in the air to brief an approach. But no, at the Checkride there are no surprises, there are no unpredictabilities. We sat down and we discussed what we will be flying. I will be flying, he will be watching. He asked me to do one approach on autopilot and two by hand, so I had to do an autopilot approach, but I can't do more than one, and I was given an option to choose which one, and I deferred that choice to do it later in the air. Like a side note, on that day I was really under the weather, not feeling well, and still decided to do it because it was good enough for the Checkride on a good sunny day. It was not helping to concentrate, of course, so I thought I'd use that Joker card when the time comes, and it helped. More on that later. Also, I was given an option on connecting with flight following or using the DPE as a simulated ATC inside the plane, which I preferred. My flight plan was like follows. We depart Sierra 12 with ODP. I get vectored to the gate of RNAV 17 approach at KCVO. I fly RNAV 17 as a non-precision approach with WAS disabled. Then I fly MIST at MIST approach point to INOP, then vectors to MAFI for ILS 17. I fly the full ILS 17 approach from MAFI to minimums. Then I go MIST and hold at shed as published. From there we do unusual attitudes. Then I get vectors to a VOR-A approach at Sierra 12 and do a full VOR approach with partial panel and circle to land. So that covers all the ACS required items to do on a Checkride. When we got to an airplane, we started with a pre-flight, and DP was observing me do that. We sat in the plane. I received craft clearance via a simulated phone call with 20 minutes to depart. I set my timer, I run through the checklists, do a safety briefing, get local weather, then I taxi with a brisk walk speed. So some DPs really don't like you rushing on a taxiway up to the point where the speed indicator starts showing. That would be a fail with many of them. As I taxi, I do instruments checks with callouts and make sure it is clear to depart before I roll onto the runway. I take off, I turn at 400 AGL and follow the ODP at Albany. I contact simulated ATC and report 1 mile north of Albany, climbing 3,400 per ODP versus actually 4,000 that I was given in craft clearance, and more on that near fail in the last paragraph. The moment I correct to a 4,000, I get vectored to RNAV 17 approach. So I execute the turn, arrive at the 4,000 altitude to the gate of 17, join approach, pink needles, step down to minimums, and do a missed approach procedure to INOP. I request ILS 17 approach, full approach from MAFI, and already on my way to INOP I received vectors, direct MAFI, and clearance for the approach with a typical altitude limit. I choose to fly that ILS approach using autopilot, and this was the least busy part of the whole check ride. Yes, DP had to observe me using autopilot, but I guess also it's a good test of do the person gets nervous in the moments of this awkward silence, because for many minutes in a row there was just nothing happening in a cabin. We were tuned to a frequency that didn't have communications, and my simulated ATC had nothing to say. I ran through the checklists to make sure I haven't forgotten anything many times. My wire checklist, I recommend that one. And still, it was a full arc of 20 minutes of nothingness, because autopilot was flying an arc perfectly and I was there sitting and observing. So that was a good approach. Again, easy, but sometimes people get nervous when there's nothing happening. So don't fail that part, that's easy. At the end of the arc, I switch autopilot from nav mode to approach mode, and the rest of ILS 17 approach was uneventful again, flying on autopilot. Once I get close to minimums, I disengage autopilot slightly ahead of decision altitude, initiate missed approach by hitting toggle, and advance the throttle at the same time. GPS switches to pink needles automatically, and I fly pink needles as published to hold at shed. I re-engage autopilot at about 1000 feet MSL and per manual 800 AGL, and the rest of the hold again was very uneventful, because autopilot flies everything as published. And don't forget that while it's not required, it's good to report entering holding pattern as per recommendation, not a requirement, of the AIM 5-3-3. We let autopilot do a one full hold, again that continued stretch of nothingness in the cockpit, and we jokingly agreed that autopilot does great job. We probably don't need the second holding pattern as we planned. Later I realized that DP was expecting me to hand fly, that's why he asked for 2 holds, but at the same time he gave me the choice of autopilot on an approach of my choice. So that was a get out of hold card. Once we departed shed, I did 2 unusual attitudes, and nothing as extreme as I would do on my training flights with my double I. So that was very easy. Once we were done, I contacted my simulated ADC in the next chair, my DP, and requested a VOR alpha approach at Sierra 12. Then I was given vectors with something that confused me lightly: proceed CVOR for VOR A approach when able. We did discuss that at a debrief, whether it was a clearance for an approach or a direction towards an approach, but agreed that the main thing is, when in doubt, just clarify, because the worst things happen when one does the assume. Once on my path to an approach, I have set up for an approach, the navigation verified green needles, did the source Morse course, and reported ready for the approach, and received direct CVO with standard PTAC with confirmed approach clearance at that moment. Before getting to the procedure turn, I was told to fly manual, as if autopilot just failed. So while I was planning to fly approach manual, DP asked me to start not using autopilot a lot sooner. And by the way, I didn't mention, but most of in between the approach moments I was flying on autopilot. So at that moment he said, okay, I know you can use it, now let's fly, hand fly airplane, and the rest was still well. Once I get to procedure turn, I execute the turn and switch to green needles when I'm aligning with the course inbound. Then step down to minimums, follow my minimums. The main rule is do not go below minimums within the final approach fix. Both the waypoints and especially the the minimums of the approach. That would be a automatic fail. And so the last bit of my personal advice is do those mock check rides. In the weeks leading to my actual check ride, I did 3 flights with double eyes who were sitting there observing me fly, taking notes, and being suspiciously quiet. You need to get used to that so you don't get nervous on the actual check ride. So good luck to all of you who are pursuing the IFR rating and beyond. We'll see you on this channel and in the skies.